Hello everyone. Before I get into the main topic of the video today, I just wanted to apologise for the sporadic uploads recently. Hopefully some people will have seen the post over on the community tab talking about this. Obviously there was a video missing entirely this past week, so I do apologise for that. I've had serious issues with my sound recording kit, and then unfortunately it died on me, and the replacement has only arrived just in time to film this ready for the 1st of July. So my apologies for that. There were some uploads over on RM Military Miscellany, my secondary channel. They'd been pre-recorded. Unfortunately, I didn't have a pre-recorded video for this channel this past week, so that's why that was missing. We should be back to the normal upload schedule on this channel of 2 videos per week, as obviously the sound recording equipment have got a replacement, and barring any further technical issues, everything is back to plain sailing now. So what we're looking at, of course, here is the Mannequin of the Month for July 2023. As usual, the topic was chosen over on Patreon, and we're back to talking about the Troubles here. So Operation Banner, the British Army deployment to Northern Ireland beginning in 1969. What we're looking at here is the subsequent year, 1970. We're talking about some of the specialist kit which had been introduced, some of which is not present on the Mannequin, but I'll talk about it a little bit as well. And the gradual development, the gradual modernisation of British public order kit, anti-riot helmet and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll start with the first item representing that progression in kit up at the top here, which is the helmet. Now this is a Mark IV steel helmet. It has been modified, being fitted with an anti-riot visor, which you can see here. It folds down like that. And this involves fitting a bracket into the helmet itself. It's actually riveted in place inside using the rivets at the top, and then the liner is fitted in against that bracket, and the bracket allows the fitting of the face shield here. These were not around in 1969, and it was a serious omission from British public order kit, you could say. There were clip-on visors which could be used clipped onto the rim, the strap around the back of the helmet. They did exist, but were in limited supply, and something better, something more sturdy was really needed. So you see these appearing in large numbers in 1970 as the first step in introducing public order kit for British troops serving in Northern Ireland. You'd also see a transition away from the aluminium and mesh shields to Perspex riot shields. So there's a gradual transition, a gradual improvement of kit, and this would carry on throughout the 1970s with more better adapted equipment for use in public order duties. But that's one early example, is the introduction of the Mark IV steel helmet with visor. And interestingly, I have looked at a sealed pattern example of one of these held in the archives, held in the collection of the National Army Museum in a previous video on the channel. Worth going and having a look at that video if you'd like to see a sealed pattern example of one of these. The basic uniform consists of the 1960 pattern combat uniform. We have the combat smock here, the second issue version of the combat smock, and we'll see the details of that as we move this round. Still in green, DPM 1960 pattern would appear at around this time. Later in the year, you start to see photos of that showing up, and certainly that was issued out to a degree, and then 1968 pattern came in and was issued on a much wider scale, of course. So the British Army very much in transition, not only in receiving new public order kit for use in Northern Ireland, but also transitioning from the green uniform to the DPM uniform. Body armour is worn, as you can see here, and this is US 3/4 collar body armour. It's commonly referred to as M1969 or M69. That isn't correct, it's 3/4 collar. The M69 is a modified version that uses a Velcro closure and various other things. This, as I remember, is actually dated 1967, if I remember correctly, possibly 1968. But it's US 3/4 collar body armour, very similar to the M1952A, which we've seen in previous videos looking at recreations of kit from Operation Banner. It simply has the addition of this 3/4 collar around the top, basically. There are some other design detail differences as well, but that's the most visual one, is the collar around the neck here, as you can see. Very typical at this time, alongside M1952A body armour, and obviously again as the 70s progressed, this would be improved upon through into the 1980s when improved Northern Ireland body armour was introduced. So again, it's a gradual progression of the kit issued to troops in Northern Ireland, a gradual improvement in design. We just have a bog standard US manufactured version of the 3/4 collar body armour here. Webbing is carried, and you can see that here, very stripped down. What we have at the front here is a single ammunition pouch round on the left hip, carried on the waist belt here, slung quite low on the hips so it doesn't interfere with the body armour, as you can see there. And this is a second issue ammunition pouch, which was still fairly common at the time. Obviously the third issue had been in production for several years by this point, but the second issue pouch is still in use. So we have that there. That's the front of the mannequin. We'll start turning this around now and have a look at some of the other details. Moving on to look at the right hand side of the mannequin here, you can see a side profile of the Mark IV helmet there. You can see the bracket coming out from under the rim, the screw attaching the visor there, and there are a series of washers there to give enough friction for this to sort of stay up out of the way when not required. When required, of course, it can be brought down to protect the face. Let's see if it'll stay back up again. Didn't always work very well, and sometimes you actually see these rocked right back out of the way to sit on the rear rim of the helmet, because sometimes this didn't work as it was supposed to do. In theory, when not in use, you can leave the visor up like that. You can see the side of the body armour here, you can see that there, and then the arm of the combat smock coming out of the body armour there. Rock that back a little bit further so it doesn't fall down. You can see here the elbow reinforcement, which is what marks this out as a second issue example. You can see you basically have a circular elbow reinforcement there. The second issue had this. The preceding examples, the preceding pattern of this, the early 1960 pattern, combat smock had a elbow reinforcement piece all the way around the elbow there. And you can see the detail of the cuff there. Got two buttons there to draw this in around the cuff if required. On the webbing belt, the waist belt here, you can see we have the water bottle pouch round on the hip here. This is a first issue water bottle pouch, and it had been superseded in production long before this, but you still see many of these in use in Northern Ireland in 1969, 1970, certainly in the very early 70s. These are still around to some degree. Obviously the army doesn't throw something away just because something else has entered production. So first issue water bottle pouch there with the water bottle and the cup nested together inside there. This is worn quite far round on the hip, so it gives a bit of a rest for the butt of the rifle. If the rifle were carried, you can rest the butt on the top of the water bottle pouch. Just rest it there. It's quite a comfortable way of carrying and holding the rifle if required. So we have that side of the mannequin there. I don't think there's anything more to talk about here. We'll move this around now and have a look at the back. Looking at the back of the mannequin here, you can see the back of the helmet there with the visor, the back of the body armour, and we have the waist belt coming round here, again slung low on the hips to avoid the body armour, as you can see there. And then round on the left hip we have the respirator haversack for the S6 respirator. Now this is the early canvas version. Obviously later in the 1970s you'd see a nylon version introduced. This is what we have here, the canvas version, which was the standard issue at this time. And it's carried on the left hip in this instance. You'd sometimes see them carried on the right hip, sometimes they were carried at the front for ease of access. And this is based, particularly this mannequin, the set of equipment and so forth, is based on troops operating in the Ballymurphy estate in Belfast in 1970 on public order duties. So in those photographs the respirator haversack was carried on the left hip, and that's what I've replicated here. So quite a simple design externally. Apart from really the closure of the main flap, you have both press studs, you have two press studs there, and a quick release in the centre there, obviously with a big loop so you can get your hand in there and open this up very easily. That's the idea behind that. This could be used with a waist cord. You have a little cleat here, which the waist cord could be passed around the waist and then wrapped around that. In this instance, it's just hung on its shoulder strap, which runs underneath the body armour. So respirator carried in its haversack round on the hip there, as you can see. Looking at the left-hand side of the mannequin here, there isn't a huge amount more to see. You can see the side profile of the respirator haversack here with the waist string I mentioned before. If I lift the arm out of the way, you can see the shoulder strap coming out from underneath the body armour, obviously attaching on with this D-ring to the side of the respirator haversack there. And you can see the side profile of the ammunition pouch carried there. No bayonet carried in this instance, as you can see, just the second issue ammunition pouch round to the front of the belt there. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. From my perspective, I find Operation Banner very interesting, so it's quite nice to have this set of equipment out on the mannequin. Purely from interest's sake, I find it interesting the kit that was issued for public order duties in Northern Ireland. So having this on a mannequin, quite interesting for me from that point of view. So thank you to those who chose this topic over on Patreon. This has also given me some ideas going forward about maybe making a video looking at a progression of kits, so a timeline, if you will. If that sounds like something you might be interested in seeing and you've enjoyed watching this, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And of course, Patreon is where you can vote each month. The corporal tier over on Patreon get the opportunity to vote each month on what's going to be covered in Mannequin of the Month. And I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using Patreon and through PayPal. It really is greatly appreciated. As I always say, thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And there will of course be photographs of this posted up on those different sites as well. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down in the description as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.